last year, and I used to teach BRRRR all the time. I was everywhere you go, I would talk about BRRRR because I do believe BRRRR is a great strategy. And it's still a good strategy. But when the market changed, I was doing Instagram videos like, yo, BRRRR's dead. I know what I've been teaching you guys, but you have to understand things are changing. If anybody's teaching you to keep BRRRR out of control right now, they don't care about you. They care about making some money, and you're going to get stuck with the bag.
Welcome back to What's the Good News, the best insider look into the most influential individuals in the real estate industry as a whole.
I'm your host, Michael Smith, and this is Dominic Cardarelli. Together, Dom and I have over 20 years of real estate experience, and we always love to share the good news. Today, we have on the show a personal friend and colleague, Dan, the real estate man, Harvey. Dan is from Philadelphia and worked at SEPTA for 18 years until 2014 when he decided to quit and become a full-time real estate investor. He is now the owner of DMH Investments, who specializes in acquiring distressed properties to rehab as rentals or for resale. His main strategy is converting properties into multifamily projects by right, which eliminates the tedious zoning process. One of his major achievements has been buy-the-block acquisition, which has turned full blocks of multifamily properties into multi-million-dollar business. Dan is also a popular speaker at community events on the topic of multifamily conversion, as well as transitioning into a full-time business owner. Damn, Dan, you're playing Monopoly for real. What's the good news, man?
Yes, sir. Hey, Mike, what's going on, man? It's good to see you, Dominic. It's great to meet you. I'm feeling good. Feeling good.
I like
Doing
that.
well.
I like that. Yeah, speaking of Monopoly, man, that's like the number one game to like ruin families. I'll be honest with you, man. My brother consistently for years, man, every Christmas, this was our thing, right? We play Monopoly, but he's a mortgage broker. So he's always on, the game's not over till everyone's fully mortgaged or they're bankrupt, right? And now anytime anyone in my family hears the game Monopoly, man, they run into the other room. They don't even want to. And, now that I do real estate too, man, I'm like, oh yeah, let's play Monopoly. I'm ready, but nobody wants to get into it with us, man. It's a damn shame.
It can get really serious. It's kind of funny. I never really played it as a child, but I play it now with my kids, and they like it. It's like the kid version of it, but they love it, and they somewhat understand it because they know that I'm in that space, so they understand about renting out properties and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of cool.
Absolutely, man. So you used to work for SEPTA. What did you do for SEPTA when you worked for them, Dan?
Yeah, so when I worked for SEPTA, I worked on the regional rail, which is the railroad portion of SEPTA. I was an electrical maintainer was the title. So I worked on the wiring on trains and troubleshooting any issues. I did that for 18 years.
Wow, man, that's crazy. They have an awesome pension over there as well from the people that I've spoke to.
Yes.
How did that decision come? That was probably a hard decision for you to make, man, making that transition from a solid job, really good government type benefits to just, hey, I'm Dan the Man Real Estate, man. I'm going to work for myself. What was that defining moment for you? Kind of just, ditching that paycheck and those benefits and that pension to just saying, I'm going to work for myself.
Yeah, sure. So it was a few things that kind of led me to that point. So my plan was to stay at SEPTA for 40 years. And keep in mind, I started working at SEPTA while I was in high school. So I went to Dobbins, and that is a Vo-Tech school. So I started working at Dobbins while I was in high school. And after I graduated, that's when I started there. So I was really young. And so, I had that good job like really early. And the way I was raised to get that good job. And I got it early. And SEPTA is one of those few jobs where you can really work there 40, 50 years and keep moving up that ladder. And I also was a promoter. So I started off doing like small parties. And when I built that business up to doing small stadium events, So like 10,000 seater events, like I was doing it on the East Coast and like the Midwest. And actually, that's how I thought I was going to become wealthy. And I was young. I was in my early 20s. And so my mom, she is a real estate agent, but she's my mom. She's always making some good money. She was like, well, why don't you invest your money into real estate? You know, instead of doing what young guys do, you know how it is, you know, making some money, you know, you waste it chasing women or doing whatever, right?
Buy the nice car, all that stuff.
All that stuff that I wouldn't have now or would be almost worthless, almost guaranteed, right? and so she was like, well, why don't you invest in real estate? And I had zero interest, but it was my mom. So I said, I'll make her feel good. I'll go look at some stuff and I'll let her down later on. But I actually end up, from that process of looking at properties, I bought a property.
Right. And is this is basically your first deal? Did you do this while you were working at SEPTA?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So this is when I was working and I had the business.
What year was this, Dan?
So it was 2002 or 2003.
Okay, so going back 20 years. About
20 years ago. Yeah. And no sort of I didn't have any education about it. So my strategy was super simple at the time. I found the bank-owned duplex that cost $20,000, and I had about $25,000 cash. I was like, well, that works, right? And so
those are the good old days when you're getting
good old days, yeah. Actually, there were better days, but we can get into that a bit later. So I bought that property. I fixed it up. Took me a year or so. I rented it out. Hated being a landlord. What I realized now that I didn't realize then is that being a landlord is a skill set, and it's a skill set I didn't have. And so I got rid of that property and I sold it. And I sold it for like $87,500. Right? I didn't have a mortgage or anything, so I went to close it. I'm like, damn, right? I got this check. That was like more than I made like all year working. So it really started to kind of get the juices flowing about what real estate could do. But I still wasn't serious about it. So for the next about 3-4 years, I was playing around with real estate. I'd buy deals, sell them, and I was making money. I had no idea what I was doing, just kind of doing what felt right. And so when I turned 30, I decided, okay, by the time I'm 35, I'm quitting SEPTA. And then what I did from 30 to 35 was I bought all rental properties, and I retired from SEPTA, or technically I quit 3 days before my 35th birthday.
Nice.
And so it's kind of I've been doing it ever since. So it was definitely gradual steps, and ultimately what led me to leave SEPTA, because I could have continued working at SEPTA buying real estate. That was a no-brainer. I was there 18 years. I could pick whatever shift I wanted. I knew all the bosses. I had the relationships. I could have done that. But I really wanted to see if I could operate at a high level. And what was I capable of producing if I go all in? So that's really what drove me to leave SEPTA.
So during that transition from leaving SEPTA, was there any gaps in like your finances, and did you have a strategy for how you were going to enter the market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a good question. So one thing about me, I am, which is probably opposite of what a lot of probably people see on Instagram and on social media, I am not the jump off the bridge guy. Quit your job tomorrow, get into real estate, go do it. Yeah, no, I'm not that guy. What I did was I said, okay, how much money am I making now? At the time when I was working. Okay, if I can double that in rental income, because at the job, basically, if I work a week, the next week the pay is guaranteed, right? I don't have to worry about, tenants, people not paying. Like, it's guaranteed, right? But this is rental income, so I have to put in a little bit of fluff because maybe people won't pay me. And so I came up with a number. Now this was how I did it. I just said, okay, if I can bring in net double what I'm grossing working now, I'm gonna, that was my goal. And so that's what I did. And I actually exceeded that by the time I left there. So I was financially, I was fine, right? I was making more than enough income to cover my lifestyle at the time. One thing that I think people make it sometimes much more difficult than it has to be financially free. One thing I did is I increased my income by a lot, but I didn't increase my lifestyle at all. So my lifestyle stayed the same, right? So when I was working at SEPTA, I was working overtime and everything else, but I'd say by the time I left SEPTA, I had about probably 20, 25 units, you know? I was making good money, but I never increased my lifestyle. So every dollar I made from the rental income, it all went right back in. So it was almost like a snowball effect. Every time I bought more real estate, it just got bigger. And I could just have more money to dump back into more deals and to dump back into more deals. And then, I was doing the BRRRR strategy, which we can touch on if you want to, but everybody basically knows what that strategy is. So I would take money out. And so all I did was just roll that money over and over. And my strategy was once I quit my job, I would start doing flips, which I did. I never really loved doing flips. But I did. And then I quickly got back to buying rentals.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point that you made there is, I had my first sales job that I ever had at LA Fitness, right? One of my managers told me, when you start increasing the amount of money that you're making, you need to live exactly the same way that you were living for at least 6 months to 12 months to really understand what that additional income is going to do for you. And that has been advice that I've really just embraced my whole life. And it's really helped me avoid some disastrous outcomes. The first thing people want to do when they start making some money, they want to go get $1,000 a month car payment, right? They want to start buying all this shit. And the next thing they know, when the income slows up, they're kind of screwed. Right. So I think that's great information right there, Dan.
Certainly. You're reinvesting into the business. You're not spending money on liabilities. You're reinvesting it into a business, which is an asset-based business. So essentially your money is just being compounded, which is very, very important.
It is. And one thing that I would really encourage people to look at is you have to view your job as an asset, not this liability that sometimes people make jobs out to be. I don't really understand necessarily this whole issue with people having jobs, right? So the big thing is that banks love W-2 income. They love it, right? And so what I've seen many people do, and I mean many people do, is jam themselves up by leaving that job too quick, not understanding that has ramifications. Now you go out there not understanding that a lot of the loans that you were able to receive, you got because you had W-2 income, because you had tax returns, right? That showed income. Now you don't have that, right? And you don't have these years of showing rental income or showing some income from whatever your business is. And so, now banks are like turning you down left and right because you didn't plan for that.
Speaking of getting loans, Dan, when you you had your first property that you bought, your duplex, you sold that, you'd made that $87K on it, great return. When you had started buying those additional properties while you were working at SEPTA, were you buying those for straight cash or were you getting loans on those?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I didn't know anything about leverage. So I built up a pretty decent cash amount. All I would do is I would buy a property. And okay, let me kind of set the stage a little bit so people understand. And this ties into what I was saying earlier about a better time. So most everybody knows in 08 and 09, everything collapsed, right? All the real estate dropped, right? Also at that time, there was a glut of bank-owned properties. So for the first 5 years from 2010, 2015, all I purchased was bank-owned properties, right? That was it. There wasn't even a need at the time for wholesalers because banks were basically wholesaling properties right to investors. As long as you knew there were gatekeepers, there were certain brokerages that basically had all of the bank-owned properties. And if you could get kind of on their list, you were golden. And that's all I did. So I would take whatever, let's say at the time, I started off with single family properties. So let's say I was able to buy a single family property for like anywhere from $35,000 to $50,000, right? Anywhere in that range. Sometimes even less, but let's just say that range. And the interesting part, these properties were not full guts. These were cosmetic properties that maybe I had to paint, maybe do the kitchen, some flooring, very simple renovations. $15,000 was like, that was probably the most I was spending at that time. Wow. So I'm all into the deal for $50,000 to $65,000, $70,000. The house appraised $100,000, $120,000. Mike probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. Like these deals, they were like, that was the deal. And so I would buy them. It would take me a month or two to like do the rehab. They were super simple. I would go back. I would go to my lender because I owned them cash, and I would refinance like 80% of the value. So I'd get like somewhere between about $80,000 to $90,000 back off deals. I got all my money back and another $15,000, $20,000. I just did it again. And I did it again. And I did it like, it was just, I just kept doing those. And I did not really learn about leverage until I left SEPTA. Now that supercharged my investments when I learned about leverage. I didn't use my first hard money lender until I probably already owned like 20 properties or so. I didn't even really know that was a thing that you could do. So that's how I primarily bought, was with cash. Using cash was good enough to kind of get me out of my job. And then once I got out of the job, I learned about leverage, and then that just,
how did you get turned on to actually, hard money lending and some of this other, creative financing out there, and, really just utilizing the equity in the properties? How did that come about? Like, what was that aha moment for you?
Mm-hmm. So that happened when I became more serious about my education. So some of it was via YouTube. Some of it was joining different groups. I was a part of a local group called DIG, which was very instrumental for me just learning different concepts and understanding, like, oh, that's how that works. That's how they're able to, because I would watch like different shows. I just didn't understand how they were doing it. So, and it's so amazing now because the information is free flowing so much now on social media. A lot of it I had to fight to learn. You can basically, follow me or follow you guys, I'm sure, on like social media, you'll get the information. But it just wasn't the case. So I would see people doing things, but you wouldn't know. So unless you knew them, you wouldn't, they would give you some of the information, but you wouldn't know, you wouldn't know the other pieces to it. So I didn't really understand it. So once I became serious about seeking out the how are people doing this? And that came from joining groups, going on YouTube, which was big at the time. It's still big, but that was basically like the only source I knew of. And then like reading books.
I want to talk about hard money real quick, because I think it's very important, especially if you're just getting into it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people steer away from hard money for one reason or another. I think most of it is they kind of look at what hard money lenders charge, mm-hmm. and they make a decision like, oh, well, that I can't, why would I pay that much? But I'll be the first person to tell you that hard money is one of the easiest and most efficient ways to get into a deal. The only caveat there is obviously you need to make sure you have a deal, right?
Sure.
Hard money is probably, I've used hard money so much that I can't even remember, right?
Yeah.
A lot of steps in between there, but just to kind of confirm that hard money is a great tool. Mm-hmm. So even if you don't have that W-2, as long as you can refinance and get out of it, right? It's a great tool. You don't end up spending as much money as you think, and it ends up usually as a good result.
Yeah. So to your point, so hard money is a great tool, right? There's a lot that you should learn about it. How to vet them and all that. But to your point about people saying that the cost is too high, that's a certain mindset, right? That's the mindset I grew up with. A lot of that is basically a poverty mindset, not really understanding how money works, right? Because when you're worried about with hard money, is charging you, you're worried about what they're making versus what your profit is, right? So, I mean, not that I don't care what you charge me, but if I know there is a profit on the end, what do I really care? If that's the mechanism, right? If that's the money that's out there to get the deal done, right? If your project makes sense by plugging in what their cost is, then it's all good. If you're only just looking at what their cost is, but you're not considering your profit, then that doesn't really make sense. But that's how a lot of us are taught. A lot of people, most people are not financially literate. They don't understand. They've been taught very simple concepts, right? Don't pay high interest rates, pay low interest rates. Don't use credit, don't get into debt. Like there's a very simplified way of understanding the way money works. And so they're going to constantly get left behind because they don't really understand investing principles.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So I wanted to touch briefly on your buy the block strategy that you have. Can you speak about that? How did that come about? And really, what led you there?
Yeah. So I will say that it was the first opportunity that I had. Well, I've only bought like one block, but when I buy properties, I operate them very tightly. So I may own 4 or 5 properties on the same block, and over 3 blocks, I may own 6 or 7. But so the first time I bought a full block, the way that happened was I had an agent that bought a deal to me. This was a truly an investor-friendly agent. By investor-friendly, I mean they understand what investors want. Right? A lot of agents call themselves investor-friendly. They wouldn't know what that meant if you showed it to them. They just don't understand it, right?
Yeah.
So they bought me a deal that was a pocket listing. So I had no competition, but they knew, and this is very important. So for all of your listeners out there, the way that they knew to bring this deal to me was that I was very clear on what my niche was, right? It was a mixed use property. It was in an area where I buy real estate, which is primarily in West Philly, and they needed full gut rehabs, right? So this agent that I know, but also follows me, knows that, that's right down Dan's alleyway. He will buy a mixed use property. He loves West Philly, and he has no problem doing a full gut rehab. And the reason why I bring those things up is because investors, especially if you really need to have an avatar deal, right? An avatar project, or else it's going to be hard for anybody to help you, right? If you're telling somebody, hey, I'm buying in Philadelphia, well, what does that even mean? You buying it up the Northeast, you buying in South Philly, you buying single families, you buying triplexes. Do you want somebody to figure all that out for you? I mean, you have to, because it's going to be difficult for a wholesaler, agent, anybody to send you anything because you're too vague about what it is that you're actually buying.
Right. You need to dial in your buy box, right?
There you go. Like dial it in. And you can always pivot. You can always change. You can always expand. You need to start somewhere, because if it's I buy everything everywhere, like that don't work. I'm just telling you, people are going to get tired of sending you stuff because you're like, oh no, most of the deals, not most of the deals, a lot of the deals people send me that know me, I buy, because I'm very, very detailed about what I buy and where I buy. I'm talking about down to the blocks, right? And so if people send me deals, they know pretty much, this is in Dan's buy box. They're not sending me a bunch of fluff. And if you're sending me a bunch of fluff, I probably just won't take your emails because you're not listening. All right, so that's how I found those first 2. Now, from the first 2, and this is where it's very important to have conversations. So the lady that I bought the first 2 properties from, her and her husband used to own the whole block. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Can you tell me a little bit about, how you sold these properties and whatever? She said, oh yeah, I sold the one that is next door to these 2 to this young lady, but she hasn't done anything with it. And I sell her financing. That's interesting. Okay. Do you think she would be interested in, selling and selling the property? I don't know, but I could call her. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Call her. And so that started. So she called that young lady and we met up. That was about that next property took about 6 or 7 months of back and forth with this young lady. She really didn't have the means or the know-how to fix the property up. She didn't want to let go of it. And then she was having issues on other properties and was really starting to weigh down on her. So we eventually closed on that deal, which was very interesting. I must have sent her a contract 3-4 times. She would never sign it. And then one time she called me up out of the blue. I was like, hey, I'm ready to sell. I'm like, listen, I'll see you this contract, but like, are you going to really sign this thing? She's like, no, I really am. I need to sell it, but I need to close, in whatever, really quickly, 3 weeks or something, 3-4 weeks, which was fine. So I said, fine. And so those first two I bought with hard money. The second one I bought with private money. And so I figured out that the owner sold the last 2 buildings to a guy. It was only a year ago. So I had to skip trace him, find a guy. I'm like, man, he's probably not going to really want to sell the property. But lo and behold, he was going through a divorce. And so I was like, hey, let me check the property out. Let me see what's going on. And so by this time, we're heavy into the construction of the first 2 properties. So we're walking through, and so he doesn't know that I own the rest of the properties. And so he's trying to sell me, oh yeah, they're fixing this area up, and these prices are really going up, because there's something about your rehab dust that raises the value of the neighbor. In their mind, something about all that construction dust raises their value. And so he's trying to sell me on it. Again, he doesn't know that I'm the owner. And so, I'm talking to him. And so we actually agree on a price. And he was super gung-ho to get me to sign his contract. And so I send him the contract and I don't hear anything from him. I'm like, oh man, something happened. Because this guy was gung-ho for me to get this contract to him. So I'm like, So I reach out to him. Oh, I talked to a realtor and they tell me I can get so much more money if I list it. I said, okay. I said, how much? How much did they tell you that you can get? So he tells me, and I don't even remember what the number was. I said, okay. I said, well, listen, here is the reality. It's going to be a specialized buyer because it's mixed use, right? Both of those buildings were such 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 units. So this is not an everyday buyer. It needs a heavy rehab. So just, it's going to take some time, and then you're going to have to pay their commission. With me, I can close this prior to your next mortgage payment. As soon as title comes back, we can close. Plus, I'll give you an extra. I think I bumped it up another $30,000 or something like that, right? And so he's like, okay, and he signed. And it's probably one of the best deals. That and another one of the best deals I've ever done. I bought those 2 for less than $300,000.
Wow.
Less than $300,000. Fix them up with private money acquisition plus the rehab, fully funded. I didn't put out any money. That same 2 properties appraised less than a year for $650,000. Right, and I maybe put $100,000 into that deal. So it was definitely worth me bumping it up a few bucks. So it wound up being like a home run deal. But so a couple important things that I take away, and then you guys can ask me, questions if you want, is, definitely have access to capital. So like I said, first 2 deals were hard money. In fact, I think this is the last time I ever used hard money. And then the other deals after that was all private money. So be able to close quickly, and have your crews ready to rock and roll, and that gave me the edge to kind of get that whole block.
That's great, man. That's great. So it sounds like private money is kind of your go-to for financing now. What how did you get to that point? Like, did you reach out to some colleagues that you had in the industry just from going to these meetups? You met guys that are trying to deploy capital. What would you say to somebody that's looking to get in and they don't really understand hard money, but they have access to some people that, do have some additional capital that they're looking to park in some, better than average returns?
Mm-hmm. So first thing is get educated on how private money works. So to go back to what I said earlier, when I started getting educated, I started to learn, because that was the other thing. I was like, well, man, how are people doing these multiple projects like this? Even with hard money, I'm like, man, that gotta get expensive. I wasn't really understanding. And then I stumbled on a private money. And there was one person in particular, and I cannot think of the guy's name right now. I tell you, I can't think of his name, but he was a private money lender. I mean, not lender. He was an investor that uses private money. And I was watching YouTube, I was like consuming it, trying to put it all together. And then he came to the Philadelphia area, which is actually how I found out about Dick. He was coming to the Philadelphia area. I went to go see him. Like, I didn't even have, I just bought the tickets. Like, I went to go see him. And I was like, man, I was so like, you ever watch somebody for so long on YouTube? I'm like, wow, this guy's really here. And I'm like,
yeah,
taking down all these crazy notes. And like, hey, I'm having this, he was like selling the course. Like, man, I'm in. Like, I was like, man, I'm in. So I bought the course and I flew down to Florida. So took the course, like learned all about private money, how it works, everything. Now, this is before I actually used it. And there's a reason why I'm telling this whole story. The point being is that you have to educate yourself above where you want to be. So wherever you see yourself going, you gotta mentally like prepare yourself for that next step. You can't wait to get to that step and then trying to figure it all out, because you're gonna stumble through it. You're always gonna make a mistake. That's fine, but it is the unnecessary ones, right? It's being unprepared that will really set you up. So I learned all about private money, how to set it up, how to pitch it, where people really store a lot of their capital, how to educate them on it, right? And so like I was ready. And then I just started executing, right? I started going, I would go to a ton of events. I would network. I would go to places where people with money are. You always want to try to find an end to talk about real estate without sounding pitchy, right? Generally speaking, it's very common, especially if you're at like higher end events, for people to ask, about your occupation and what you do. You can casually mention, hey, I invest in real estate, using private funds from individuals. Stop. The next question, how does that work? It's just a normal thing somebody, if they're interested, is going to ask. If you got to pitch it anyway, they're probably not that interested, right? Or they're going to, I always wanted to get into real estate. I know, right? That's always everybody. Everybody always wants to get into real estate, and this is a way that you can participate in real estate without having to actually, buy the properties, manage the contractors, deal with tenants and all that sort of stuff. So private money changes the game. It opened up all sorts of opportunities that's not available even with hard money, because you're able to structure way better deals. It's an absolute game changer.
Yep. Yeah. With private money, you really get to all parts of that deal is negotiable, right? The terms are whatever you guys agree with. There's no like set structure that private money guy is going to go with, like a hard money or a bank would, right? Where they have underwriting thresholds. And 100% agree, man. That's so great.
Absolutely. And then ultimately it comes down to your credibility and trust, right?
Surely.
Do people believe no matter what you're gonna get their money back to them? Because the reality, as I'm sure you both know, is that not all deals work out fine.
Yep.
That's the reality.
Well aware.
I'm sorry, was that?
I said I'm well aware.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I had a deal where I personally lost $100,000, but I paid back my investor. I didn't complain about it. I didn't say, "Oh man, look," paid him back with a smile. And guess what? Like that same year, he let me borrow another $500,000, right? Because that's not their problem. That's my problem, right? But a lot of people are not built like that. They want to come, "Oh, I lost." That's your problem, right? So when you take these people's money, you have to know you have to pay them back, no matter what.
That's why you're Dan the Man, though. That's why you're Dan the Man real estate, man,
Yeah, well, but I think that credibility matters. I mean, just in anything that you do, it's going to open doors, right? It's not the fast way, but it's the long lasting way. I mean, for me personally, I want to be doing this 20, 30 years, later, right? I want to create a legacy beyond just the money that opens doors for my children, right? And you only build that through credibility, right? That opens up, which means, and I don't want this to ever happen, but even if I lost it all, I can build it back up again because I ain't burning it up, right? So I can go back to people, and build back up again. So it's something I don't think enough people take seriously. It's a big responsibility to take people's capital.
Yeah, I mean, that can keep you up at night, man. If you have integrity in your soul, and you know that's just another job, and it could definitely keep you up at night. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, it's real. Well, that means that you have a conscience, right? I mean, because it will. And you have to figure out, okay. But it also, the one thing that I realized, and this is what I realized about people who do well, is you don't crumble under the pressure, right? You figure it out, okay. All right. And what I found is when my back is up against the wall is when I generally come up with a lot of my best ideas. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, oh man, like, why didn't I think about that? Is because, your brain only works as hard as it has to. It's like any other muscle, right? If it just kind of has the answers, it's going to go. But when it's faced with some new problem or threat that it's never faced, it has to come up with new ideas. And it's hard to come up with new ideas, Right. So, I mean, I've also learned to trust the process. Like, okay, I don't really have the answer right now, but I've been here before, so I'll figure something out.
Would you say that deal that you lost $100K on, that was probably like your worst real estate deal that you've ever been in? Or was there other ones that were more challenging? Like, what about that deal really just presented itself as that challenge?
Yeah, actually that deal wasn't that challenging. That's not why I lost the money. And no, that by far wasn't the worst, the most challenging deal. That's just the one I lost money on. What had happened was I was scaling. And so when I got access to a considerable amount of private money, I was able to buy a lot more real estate. Got it. Right. But I wasn't growing the business or myself, to be quite honest, to meet the demands of what I was trying to do. Right. So I was still trying to be the property manager, the project manager, the acquisitions person. I was never really the maintenance person, but I could be, so I was still doing all these things, running back and forth to Home Depot 20 times a day. Right. It's not sustainable. It just wasn't.
Nope.
And so that's what happened. And it taught me a very valuable lesson, one that I never forgot and I won't forget, is that would get you to one level. So doing that got me to the level that I could retire from SEPTA. But it was not going to get me to the level of running a company, running a business, right? And so I had to do something different. And so that loss was necessary for me to understand that what I was doing wasn't going to work for the next tier, for that next level that I was attempting to get to. That was going to mean I had to delegate. I had to be more of the CEO than trying to be hands-on in every single, every single thing I have to have input on. It just doesn't work to micromanage at that level. So none of those losses, any losses I ever take, I don't regret any of them. I don't wish to change any of them. They were all learning opportunities. What I try to do through my educational system is to try to help other people avoid that. You don't have to recreate the wheel. I was out there doing that. So I don't recommend that.
Yeah, education is very expensive. I think we all know that. It's very expensive.
One way or the other. One way or the other. I tell people, if you think paying me costs a lot, you make a mistake. And then the interesting part is sounds like, Mike, you've been through some things. It's easy, because you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, generally big rehabs. One oversight, one mistake could cost you thousands, tens of thousands, right? So this idea of, listen, you can figure it out on your own. You absolutely can. It's not going to be cheaper though. I can guarantee you. That's not even a sales pitch. It's just, it won't be. And there's really no glory in it. There's no extra rain I figured this all out by myself. It was well, why? I want all the cheat codes. And so that's what I do. I don't mind paying at all to gain access to individuals that have proven track records. Why sit here and try to figure out what's been figured out? It doesn't make sense.
Yep. Another thing I've noticed as well in my career, Dan, is sometimes my passion for a project will misguide me in terms of making the right decisions. Mm-hmm. Where, I get too close or attached to it. I had a big project in Massachusetts that, I've been working on for the past 4 years, and we just had to scale this thing back and just keep it simple and just kind of small cash flow. Mm-hmm. That's mm-hmm. the key. And, we had this grandiose plan, and during COVID and supply chain increases, right? That plan no longer made sense, man. We had a 250% increase on our costs, right? That is not a fundable deal anymore. Yeah, so we had to just completely remove our emotion and our attachment. You spend all this time building something and it's like your baby. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just got to take it behind the barn and put it out of its misery. And
that's an excellent point. Because I think people are making the wrong decisions now, right? So they have deals that no longer make sense. Interest rates have gone up. You bought it at a different time. It won't cash flow no matter what you do.
Yeah.
I have these consultations with people all the time, and I give everybody the same advice. And it's advice that I take, so I don't just give it. Say, when you're going to lose quickly. Stop trying to magically turn this loser deal into a winner by some imaginative thing or what. It's there's nothing there. And oftentimes, even though people don't want to hear it, they often think and be like, you know what? I was struggling trying to figure out how to make it work. It's like this it doesn't pencil. Right? It's just, unless you can run it at a loss, and some people can run it at a loss, right? But newer investors generally can't, right? They need the capital out of there. They need it to make money for them. They can't lose $1,000 a month to keep the property. It just doesn't make sense. And when you have these big interest rate hikes where, everybody was burning out all crazy and you bought deals in 2022 and you thought maybe your rate was going to be 5% and something, and now you're lucky if you're at 7, you could be at 8. I've seen 9, right? Like, how are you going to make that cash flow?
Yep.
It won't work. So being able to really detach yourself from that project and also understand, so something that I said earlier, it's one deal. It's one deal. And don't, even if it's a big deal, it's still one deal. There will be others.
Yep.
I've yet to find that there's not more deals out there. It may feel like it if you're new, but I've been doing this long enough, and I can assure you, every time you think you saw the best deal, another one comes along, right? But you have to be in the game to be able to get it. If you let that other deal just kind of tick you out the game, then you can't even keep going, right? Or you're sitting there trying to make it a winner when it's not a winner. Get rid of the loser faster so you can actually get to a winner and make some money.
When did you start? When did you start doing your consultating and your speaking? Because it sounds like you do a lot of that, and you spend a lot of time on that now, and that's kind of why me and Mike started this podcast, was to give back the information that we got the scars on our back to get that information, right?
Yeah.
When did that start for you, and what is your plan with that ongoing in the future?
Sure. So it started. I'll say the first big presentation I ever did was probably about 5-6 years ago for DIG. They have a main meeting. I don't know if you guys know what DIG is. And so that's what kind of got me. Now, I was doing this because I wanted to share the information, right? I enjoyed it so much, and I do it. I still enjoy it. I just wanted to share what I was doing and some of my experiences. And so there really wasn't any, I wasn't charging anything. I was just doing it. And then what happened was, because I started doing that, it really brought a lot of attention to me and what I was doing. And I got a lot of pick your brainers. And that, I even did that for a little while, right? Can I take you out to lunch? Can I do this? And the one thing I found is that, generally speaking, people don't value what they get for free. They just don't. And so most people wouldn't do anything. And so I'm spending my time and energy giving this information, and they're not really doing anything with it. And so once I said, well, that's not going to work. And then I started to do consultations, and I have some courses, and I'm creating more courses. The one thing that I found that was really missing is that I see people, and this is not a dig, but they'll do 2 or 3 deals and they have a course. And I get it. I get the hustle, right? Fine.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at it. But it's you really don't have that depth of knowledge to really help somebody through tough times. If all you know is when deals go good, well, how can you help somebody when a deal goes bad? If all you know is when the market is up, well, how can you help somebody strategize when the market's down? Right? You don't have enough depth of knowledge to really work things through. And I remember last year, and I used to teach BRRR all the time. I was everywhere you go, I would talk about BRRR, because I do believe BRRR is a great strategy, and it's still a good strategy. But when the market changed, I was doing Instagram videos BRRR's dead. I know what I've been teaching you guys, but you have to understand things are changing. If anybody's teaching you to keep BRRRR out of control right now, they don't care about you. They care about making some money, and you're going to get stuck with the bag. You're going to get stuck on the hook when deals don't work out, because they're not going to pencil out. I'm telling you right now. And I did a 3-part video explaining to people, hey, listen, this is why it was dramatic by saying BRRRR is dead. But the point is, I wanted people to pay attention, right? If you're just moving along as if the overall economy does not affect you, you're crazy. The overall economy takes down banks and large institutions. If you think it won't take down a small investor, you're out of your mind. It'll wipe you off the map, and it won't register you. There won't be an article about you. You just go bankrupt. right? And so it's like, yo, you got to pay attention to what's going on.
Well, what are your thoughts on what's going on right now?
Exactly.
With
Like,
the
what do you
banks,
think?
with the banks going on, SVB, right? First Republic is about to freaking fall off the face of the earth. They were down like 90% from their freaking all-time high, man. You had UBS coming in to bail out, Credit Suisse, which is the largest mortgage holder of all American mortgages, by the way. If anybody doesn't know that, what are your thoughts on that, Dan? Like, where is the future? Like the next year, 5 years, 10 years? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I don't have a crystal ball. So I would tell you this. I think what's more important than what happens in the next few years is the ability. You have to have some understanding of how the economy works. So what I tell people is like, it's not about the bricks. So the bricks are a means to an end. It's the asset class that you're choosing. You could just as much have chosen to be in stocks. You could choose to be in business, but you need to understand the way your business, which is real estate, is affected by the economy at large, right? And what to look out for. And what are you doing in case these things change? So for example, when I started seeing last year, rates were going up, I stopped doing large multifamily conversions. I stopped, right? I pivoted because I'm like, well, I don't know where the rates are going to be. I need to be able to model the back end of it out. So I need to adjust my plan, right? I can't just be like, stick my head in the sand and say, well, this is what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. This is what I'm going to keep doing. That's foolish. You got to be able to see what's going on and pivot. Now, some things I think that's going to happen, and we're already seeing happen. I was saying this from last year. There's going to be a lot of people who tried their best to hold on to deals that they had from 2022. Most of their hard money loans have all expired. If not, they're going to be expiring soon. They don't have a way out. Those deals are going to be coming to market. I'm already seeing 50% done, 80% done. I'm like, dang, like you didn't have the last 20,000 to get that done. But that's where it's going to be at. So I think there's going to be some opportunities there. I think there are going to be, people who are just tired of the stress and went out. There are going to be people who thought that they could refinance and they cannot, right? And they're realizing that, and they realize they're going to have to either sell it at a loss or give keys back to the hard money lenders. So I think there's going to be opportunities to do deals that do not require as much legwork, right? And I think that we're at a point where sellers understand that what they could get, they can't get anymore. And so deals are going to be better. I mean, just like myself, I had a 5-unit under contract at the beginning of 2022. And I had it under contract for $250,000. They had title work issues. Crazy how things happen. They had title work issues. We couldn't close. They had to do a quiet title. Came back around October or November 2022. I got it under contract for $200,000. Right?
Wow.
Why? Because the market changed. Right? So I could use the market as my negotiating tool. Hey, listen, rates are up. I can't pay you the same. Right? I got to make sure I'm able to refinance on the way out. And this was a mostly cosmetic deal, but the owner was a burnt out landlord, had, crappy tenants in there. I just didn't want to be bothered with it, and I had a private lender and I could close in, 30 days. So I think that, and the other thing is I think that owners are going to be more willing to sell on terms. So the biggest part is like, if you're a one-trick pony, people were panicking over BRRR. I can't use BRRR anymore. I'm like, listen, if BRRR was your only strategy, you have bigger problems than you thought. You can't be a one-trick pony. You have to have a better understanding of how real estate works. If you don't, then you need to get it. You need to find a mentor. You need to find somebody who has more strategies than just BRRR. BRRR is a great strategy. And I'm not knocking it, but if that's the only way you know how to do deals, you're going to limit yourself. You're going to leave a lot of money on the table because you only know how to do things one way.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, man. So in your rental portfolio that you have, 25 plus doors in your portfolio now. I'm sure you have some crazy landlord war stories, man. We always like to hear about them. What's one of the craziest things that you've had to deal with a tenant?
You know what? One of my craziest tenants, I have so many, it's when I call it like, I feel like when you're a landlord, it's like you do a lot of trauma. And I like erase a lot of it out of my brain so I can keep functioning. Like I get through it and I'm just like, okay, I'm done with that. Yeah. I'd say one of the most annoying things was I had a tenant who was not pre-law. She was in law school. And boy, did she let you know. Like even like through the whole thing, it was just, and it was one of those things. You ever had that voice in your head? I was going to sell this property, and the agent reached out to me. I have this great tenant. They're moving in to finish up law school, and I was like, I didn't really need to sell it. I was like, okay, and I did it. And when I sent the lease, they like marked it up with all these little changes, and something in me is like, oh, she's going to be a pain in my ass. Mm-hmm. And when I tell you, she was a pain in the ass all the way through to the end. Finally, she leaves out and then sues me. Of course, because why not? She wanted literally, you couldn't talk to this woman and her not tell you that she was going to law school. It was so comical. I'll give you the shortest version I can of this. So we went to court, hired a lawyer. It was some ridiculous case. The way the judge, it took the judge like 45 days to get back to us with a verdict, and I lost. And my lawyer was like, I think he just forgot what the arguments was and just like sided with her. So I was like, no, I'm going to appeal this. And so when you appeal it, you actually sit in front of this panel of lawyers that arbitrate. And so we go in there. And so the first question that they ask is, are both sides represented by a lawyer? And so, of course, my lawyer, yes. And she says, yes, I took the bar. I should get it back in a week. So the middle lawyer is like, so you're not a lawyer. Okay. This is how it started. So you're not a lawyer. Okay. And it was, I shouldn't say this, but it was oddly satisfying to see her like humbled a little bit. Yeah. And when I tell you, so this is the difference between, and this could be a good analogy for investors too, because it's one thing to get the theory. It's a whole other ballpark to do it. When I tell you, she had no idea of the procedural way of doing things. When you're supposed to be doing opening arguments, she was in the wrong part. They had to stop her so many times to the point where they stopped the whole meeting, turned around. Now we're in one room. They turned around, kind of huddled up. You can hear her talking. He was like, listen, she doesn't really know what she's doing. Do you think we should keep going? Should we keep he was trying to whisper, but we're in the same room. Do you think we should let her even do this? And ultimately, just let her go. So they go on. It got so bad that I felt, and she was irritated. I felt bad for her because it was that embarrassing. I felt bad for her, but ultimately that worked against me. Ultimately, it worked against me because my lawyer was an asshole. I don't know if you can't cuss him. He's a bit of a jerk. And I think that rubbed him the wrong way. He could have just let her hurt herself. And he was being a jerk about it. And I think they were they kind of started to come to her aid. And I was like, oh man, dude, chill out. And so ultimately I still lost, but they reduced it by a lot. But I think the only reason I lost, she didn't have a leg to stand on. The only reason I lost was because I think they felt bad for her. Exactly. Yeah. There's no legal reason. I tell people court systems are nothing like you see on TV. It's based on just the law. Nah.
Not even close.
It's just based on how everybody's feeling that day. And, because we're just people, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And they felt for her. So, yeah. So that was that was, I have like some real war stories, but that's one that kind of sticks in my brain because she was just so irritating.
Yeah, I got one like that now. She's just not an attorney.
Yeah.
She acts the same way, but she's just not even an attorney, but she knows it all, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, arbitration is rough too, man. I'm in arbitration right now with a contractor, man. And just, dude, I don't wish civil litigation on anybody, man. That is just, it's a drain on your money. It's a drain on your your mental state, man. And it's just like nobody wins except for the attorneys in these damn things. You know what I mean?
That's all the time, and you very rarely get paid out.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I've won plenty of cases against other investors, against contractors. Only time I ever get paid out, which is rare, is with tenants, and that's if they go to buy a home.
Yep.
100%.
Before we wrap up here today, Dan, is there anything you'd like to share, mention to listeners and how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. If they want to follow me on Instagram, it's Dan the Real Estate Man 1. Website, it's Dan the Real Estate Man.biz. I do have some courses available now that are on multifamily conversions, which is the strategy that I utilize to build the bulk of my portfolio. And just a short understanding of how it works is I buy buildings that have advantageous zoning, and I turn them into multifamily buildings by right, skipping the variance process. And so I walk people through that whole process, from analyzing deals to funding deals to rehabbing deals to the refinance cash out, every step of it, all the documents that I use and all that sort of stuff.
That's great, man. We'll link all that stuff in the description below so people can get in touch with you.
A lot of value here today, buddy. Thank you very much for your time. If there's anything I can do for you personally, please let me know.
I will. And thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing the good news, Dan. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right.
Brother, take it easy.